This tale follows on the tale of the finger plant fiasco. So, I was at home, trying to explain to my wonderful wife exactly why I had a flower pot of fingers on the patio. I was winning the debate on keeping them when my phone decided to ring. Yet again. I answered with a cocky attitude and a sarcastic remark, something along the lines of, "Am I the only fucking cop you know?" And I was met with a staunch ignorance and an attitude from the coroner. "Look, smartass, you're the fucking sheriff, so yeah. Basically, you're the only cop I fucking know. So shove that snarky attitude and get your fat ass back to the old Peter farm. Code 3 it if you want. It's bad." I explained to my wife that I had to go. Being the daughter of a cop before marrying me, she had already been very clear on the perception of how our life together would be. She would often say, I was married to the job, but I had a mistress. I used to argue that point, but she had the proof. All of it. She'd been right. But that's not the story you want to hear, is it? I don't think so. You want to hear about the last of the finger plants, right? Well, maybe where they came from, or maybe you just want to see pictures. Hell, I don't know, maybe you want to be creeped out or even terrified. I want to answer your questions, and I want to describe my creepiest encounters. But first, this one. I arrived at the police station. When I actually made it to my desk, I was instantly approached by the coroner. "Well, it took you fucking long enough, jackass. Come with me. I gotta show you something." I followed the large man down the hallway, under the elevator. I couldn't help but chuckle at the sight of the large man waddling down the hallway, like a duckling with a sprained foot. What made it even funnier was the bright yellow scrubs he always wore. On the elevator down to the garage, the coroner cracked a rather loud and wet fart, before flapping his bright yellow scrubs to disperse the acrid stench of ass. I was about to tell the nasty bastard exactly what I thought, when he started to spew hot air from the other end. So I was called to a natural death recovery this morning. Happened to find something that I thought you should see. Haven't shown or told anybody else what I'm about to show you. So I arrived at the scene to collect Mrs. Thompson, and when I get there, her hospice nurse is just pacing back and forth in front of the front door, damn near eating her fingers off. I tried to get her to show me inside, but she refused to enter the house. She gave me her card and fucking flew out of there. So I grabbed my stretcher, a bag, and glove up, and I walked in the door. I noticed there was a small line of flour in front of the door, like a barrier. But it's flour, not salt. So I don't know why it was there. I stepped over it and entered the home. When I stepped in, I noticed right away not the smell of death. No, not that easy. The smell of putrescine, infection. That could be explained away, except Mrs. Thompson didn't have any open sores, and she was only dead because of a brain tumor that had just been discovered a month prior. So I immediately went into search and destroy mode. He paused here, and we quickly exited the elevator that had become an execution chamber for two. I go into the home and I'm looking for the deceased, and I find this, he continued, and he pointed at the table in the corner of the dark, dingy morgue. On the table was a shape that I recognized somewhere in the primal area of my brain, but not quite on a conscious level. It's a fetus, Sheriff. It's not viable, no brain, but that's not the odd part. What's odd is this, he said as he flipped over the fetus to reveal its backside. Growing out of the back and the head were millions of hair-like roots. They were still caked in dirt and actively twitching in front of us. What the actual fuck? First the damn fingers, now this? What's wrong with this town? I asked out loud to nobody in particular. The coroner went on to tell me that Miss Thompson had been harvesting her own eggs. He told me that she went as far to remove an ovary and had made arrangements with something or someone to provide cooling chambers. Now I have to say that IVF was not very popular or effective back then, so having a way to store viable embryos was an amazing feat for a normal person. He continued by telling me that he found and confiscated boxes of Betamax tapes depicting surgical procedures that she was performing on herself and others. I didn't ask about that. I was amazed that anybody could remain conscious while cutting that far into their own body. I left the coroner's office and drove to the old Thompson place. just outside the main town, and I started snooping around. The smell of rot was heavy in the air of the small ranch house. I made my way into the front room and started to look around. I found medical books and magazines about the female reproductive system, postulating over IVF techniques and procedures. I walked into the first doorway I saw, and it had led me to a staircase to the basement. Down there was a stainless steel surgical table and a bunch of surgical equipment, bloodstains on the floor, and large flower pots and bags of soil filled all the free space. Pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together in my head. The overhead fluorescent lighting flickered and buzzed, adding an awful atmosphere to the subterranean space. I walked up to the closest pot, and I used my knife to shuffle around in the soil and inspect the contents of the massive ceramic pot. As I shifted the dirt around, I discovered yet another tiny fetus. This one only had a couple of hair-like roots, and was obviously not doing as well as the first one I had seen. I tried to key my portable radio and call the coroner out, but the reception was so bad I couldn't even make it to dispatch. I decided to climb the stairs and try again. Before I got to the top step, I felt a blinding flash of pain across the back of my head, and I saw lights. Lost my balance and hit the steps, hard. Rolled onto my back and I lost consciousness. But as I did, I saw a figure approaching me. When I awoke, I was naked, strapped to one of the tables in the basement. The lights were still buzzing and flickering, but possibly louder than before. I could hear movement, but I couldn't turn my head to see what it was. As I laid there and took in my surroundings, the buzzings from the lights shifted, and they took on a new quality. It sounded almost like a pair of differently pitched buzzing noises, taking turns making noise. The longer I listened, the more like a conversation it seemed. At some point, the buzzing became less of a priority for me, and my mind wandered. I could still remember that helpless feeling, that instant when I thought I may never see my wife again. My eyes filled with tears and a deep, blinding rage filled my entire being. I gently added pressure to my restraints till I was straining as hard as I could, but I couldn't budge an inch. It was at that exact moment I resigned to my fate. But I decided I wouldn't go easily. I would fight however and whenever I could. I was trying to think of a way to fight out of my situation. Then the sounds of movement got closer. I slowed my breathing and did my best to calm myself, so maybe I'd be able to think a little more clearly. I steeled my resolve, so they say. "Ah, Sheriff, you're awake. Good. I hate to work on a silent piece of meat. So with that in mind, let us begin." A deep, gravelly voice said from just beyond the top of my head. "Go on then, get to it, fuckwit," was my only response. With a slight chuckle, the source of the voice appeared at my side, slowly stepping into view. He was tall and slim, but he looked oddly familiar. I knew I should recognize him, but I didn't know why or from where. I studied his appearance for a moment, as he began to prepare himself with the surgical tools on a tray beside the bed I was tied to. That's when the jackass was done playing with his tools. He turned back to me. He smiled at me with pure hatred. I stared back into his eyes. He straightened his smile and then removed the white lab coat he was wearing. What I saw under the coat, I couldn't fight it. I gagged. There were hunks of him missing. Wherever a piece was gone, moss and little yellow flowers with 3 petals poked out. Not many, but they were there. I could see things wiggling around under the moss, like his skin was pulsating. "Oh, you like it? Good. Pretty soon, you'll have some just like mine." He laughed as he plunged his hand deep into his abdomen and pulled out, and holding on to several snake or worm-type things. They thrashed against his grip, and even appeared to try to bite him, but his grip never faltered. As they began to reach the wriggling towards my body, I screamed, loud. So loud that I could taste blood at the back of my throat again. I fought against my restraints, this time feeling them stretch and begin to rip, even slightly. I forced against them yet again, and I managed to rip my right arm free. I was able to use my newly freed arm to knock his hand away. I got lucky enough to scatter the things from his grip. When those things hit the floor, the buzzing sound crescendoed to a new level of painful. Now it was a physical feeling of vibration. I fumbled my free hand against the one holding my left arm down, and I managed to free that as well. The half-man, half-plant scurried to the floor to pick up the worms things. They were wiggling away. He dropped to the floor and desperately tried to pick up all of them that he could. The buzzing increased in tempo, and at that time I knew for a fact it was a voice screaming at the things on the floor. I continued to struggle to free myself from the leather straps holding me down to the table. I was able to free my head, one more leg. That's when I heard heavy footsteps from upstairs. Not knowing who or what was coming made the entire situation that much more worse. I struggled to free my other leg, and as soon as I did, I rolled off the table. I hit the floor, hard. I scrambled to hide behind one of the ceramic pots. I waited to see who came down the stairs. I was relieved to see Cooper, the deputy sheriff, and Detective Tolson descending the stairs. Before they were completely down the steps, I yelled to them that there was one subject on the floor in the middle of the room. He was armed and dangerous. Tolson leapt down the final steps and fired 3 shots into the thing crouched on the floor before making his way into the basement room. I stood up and looked around for my clothes. When I couldn't find them, I tried to hide my stuff behind the gurney I had been strapped to. I explained to Tolson and Cooper what happened, and how it came to be that I was currently swinging in the breeze. As I was talking to them, I heard someone thump their fat ass down the steps, and then I heard the coroner's voice. "Are you cold, Sheriff? Choke on a dick. Will you help me find my uniform?" I responded before finishing the description to the pair of officers. "Okay, so how did you guys know to come out here? I haven't been missing that long." "Sheriff," Cooper started, "you've been gone for 33 hours. We actually came out here yesterday to find you. Nobody was here. Just your cruiser still in the driveway. Right before we showed up here today, Miss Thompson's nurse called and said that she swung by to grab her belongings, and there were 2 vehicles in the driveway, and all the locks had been changed. We sped over and only found 1 car in the drive," Tolson continued, "and we haven't been able to find your cruiser yet. Your wife is pretty worried." The coroner wasn't able to find my clothes, or my gun, or even my badge, but he brought me a scrawl from his van, and we collected the evidence in the room. When I shook the dirt off another fetus, Tolson yelled, "Fucking mandrake!" Well, not all the way, but yeah. During our investigation, we discovered hundreds of journals, all from the late Thompson woman, most describing how to go about growing herself a perfect new body. Not a child, but a new body for her. She said multiple times that she had met somebody that could transfer her body to another body, but the new body could have never housed life before. I was just glad she didn't think to cut a full-grown fetus out of a womb. Maybe she thought it wouldn't work. Hell, I don't know. I do know that was the day I bought my wife a CB station. I taught her how to use it. I will never be alone in the field again. There was, however, an interesting occurrence that was unearthed while examining the evidence from the basement. The restraint strap that had held my right arm had been burned, scorched into the worn and wrinkled red leather. A small child's handprint. I think we all know what I believe happened. Alright, but this wasn't one of the better ones, but it still needed to be told. I wanted you all to see that I had garnered the attention of someone in a good way, but this was the first time that she would ever save my ass. Until the next one, I bid thee farewell. Hope the next tale will better satisfy your needs for twisted, awful, gore-riddled danger. Good night, everybody. I want to thank all my lovely patrons currently listed on screen right now. Dan R, Neophyte Games, Chaos X, JY Pyromancer, Hayden MH, Ethan A, Daniel H, Maximilian Charles P, GoGo Q Puppy LLC, Young Sykes, Dark Side of the Bear, Revenant Paul Team, Mr. Swiston, and Sarcastic B. Guys, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. If you have any suggestion for stories, please let me know.